The morning Drake finally opened the door to his own corner kitchen. The smell of onions and smoked paprika drifted all the way down to the end of Clement Street, where Miss Cora sat on her stoop, with her coffee cup warming both palms. She lifted her chin toward the new hand-painted sign above the door, nodded once the way she always nodded, when she already knew something the rest of the world was catching up to, and said nothing at all. Drake stood in the doorway with his apron string still loose, looking at the children, cutting through the morning mist on their way to school. And he thought about all the years he had not known whose life those free meals were holding up. He had never thought of himself as someone doing something large. He was just a man with a cart and a pot of something warm, and a rule he had kept every single day for 11 years without exception. If a child came to his corner hungry, that child ate for free. He had no idea that one of those children had spent the last 23 years thinking about him. Drake Blackwood had come to Clement Street the year he turned 29, with a second-hand cart he bought for $400 from a man in the Riverside district who was getting out of the business. The cart had one working wheel lock and a steam tray that tilted 2 degrees to the left, so the soup always pooled to one side. Drake leveled it with a folded takeout menu until he could afford a shim, then forgot about it. He pushed the cart to the corner of Clement and Farrow every morning by 6:30, rain or shine, and he stayed until he sold out, or the light went flat and cold, whichever came first. Clement Street in those early years was a neighborhood that had not yet decided what it wanted to be. There were still families in the row houses, older people who had lived there since the 1970s, and a stretch of commercial storefronts that changed tenants every 18 months. The building that owned the sidewalk rights on Drake's Corner was a 7-unit mixed-use parcel, purchased some years back by a real estate holding company based out of a city neither Drake nor anyone on the block had ever visited. The company collected rents and contracted a local management firm to handle the day-to-day. The property manager assigned to Clement Street was a woman named Lena Holt, and she had an office 3 miles away and a clipboard she carried like a citation book. Drake did not know any of that on his first morning at the corner. He knew the soup was good. He knew the first customer he served, a woman on her way to the hospital where she worked as a floor aide, paid him $2.50 and said it was better than anything. On the block. By noon, he had cleared $47. He went home, bought more supplies, and came back the next day. The rule about children started the same week. A boy, maybe 7 years old, had stood at the edge of the cart for 10 minutes before Drake looked up and saw the particular stillness in him. Not the stillness of shyness, the stillness of a child who had already learned not to ask. Drake filled a cup of his red bean and okra stew, pressed a corn cake on top, and set it on the narrow shelf at the side of the cart. The boy ate it in 4 minutes. Flat thanked him in a voice barely above a whisper, and ran. Drake did not think much of it. He just started watching for that particular stillness after that. And when he saw it, he fed whoever was standing there. Word traveled the way it always does on a block where people are paying attention. Children started coming to Drake's Corner before school and after school, some of them for the first bite of anything that day, some of them just because they knew he would not turn them away. He kept a small running count in a notebook. He tucked under the steam tray, not their names, just tick marks, so he knew how much to prepare. By the end of his first full year, he had served free meals to children on 43 separate days. By the end of year 3, it was regular enough that some of the neighborhood mothers would send their kids to the corner. When the end of the month came and the cupboards went thin, he never announced it. There was no sign on the cart that said children eat free. It was just understood on Clement Street that if you were small and you were hungry, Drake would feed you. Miss Cora had lived in the ground floor unit of the corner row house since before Drake was born. She was 71 the year he set up on her corner, and she had watched every business that had ever tried to survive on that stretch of faro. She watched them come with paint signs and cheerful window displays, and she watched them leave with cardboard boxes and sorry expressions. When Drake rolled his cart up that first morning, she had assessed him from the stoop, the way a person assesses, something they have been waiting for, and did not expect to arrive in that particular form, then gone inside without a word. By the third week, she was setting a folding chair on the sidewalk and keeping him company through the slow afternoon hours. She brought him sweet tea sometimes and cornbread, in foil. She told him which days the neighborhood ran heavy foot traffic and which days were dead before noon. She told him about the holding company that owned the building beside him and the property manager who had already driven one food cart off the block 2 years before Drake arrived. Drake listened carefully to that part. He kept his permits current. He renewed his health certificate every year, never late. He kept the cart clean in a way that went beyond what anyone required. The steam tray scrubbed every evening, the wheels wiped down, the side shelf free of grime. He paid his annual sidewalk vendor fee to the city on the 1st of February without fail. He knew Lena's name from the management placard on the building door, and he knew she stopped by the block twice a month on Tuesdays, and he knew she had never once spoken to him directly. She looked at the cart the way someone looks at a crack in the sidewalk they plan to have someone else fill. Drake's younger brother, helped him haul supplies 3 mornings a week. He was 26 when Drake set up the cart, a big-shouldered, easy-tempered man who had a day job at a warehouse on the south side, but showed up before his shift to help Drake load the cooler and the dry goods bin. Dre thought his brother was the best cook on the east side of the city and never stopped saying so. He also thought Drake undercharged for everything, and he said that too. Drake let him say it. The two of them had a system. Dre drove the supplies in a second-hand pickup. Drake staged the cart the night before, and together they had the corner set up and steaming by 6:20 most mornings. Dre would stay for 45 minutes, drink 1 cup of the morning soup, which was always different from the lunch soup, and leave for the warehouse. On Saturday mornings, he stayed longer, and those were the days the cart pulled the longest line. In year 3, a family named Webb had lived in the row house 2 doors down from Miss Cora. A mother and 2 kids, the older one, a girl of about 12, and the younger one, a 9-year-old boy, with quick eyes and a backpack that had 1 strap, tied back on with a shoelace. Drake had not known their last name at the time. He knew the boy, because the boy came to the cart nearly every morning that January and most of February, always arriving just before school, always accepting the cup. Drake set out without being asked. The mother worked early shifts, and the girl was still learning how to cook, and that winter had been the kind that settled into a neighborhood's bones and made everything harder. Drake had given the boy soup and bread on 31 mornings that winter, by his count. Then spring came, and one Tuesday the family was gone. No forwarding address, no goodbye. That happened on Clement Street. Drake noted it, felt the quiet of it for a few days, and kept the rule in place for the next child, who stood at the edge of the cart with that particular stillness. He had no idea the boy's name was Marcus Webb. He had no idea that Marcus Webb would spend the next 23 years carrying the memory of a corner on Clement Street where a man with a tilted steam tray had fed him every morning one winter, without ever asking why he kept coming back. If you have ever watched a good person work steadily in a place the world has not yet noticed, you know the particular texture of those years. Nothing dramatic. Nothing announced. Just the daily presence of someone showing up and doing the right thing, stacking small dignities, one on top of another, like someone who believes the pile matters even when no one is counting. The cease and desist arrived on a Tuesday, which was Lena's day. Drake was in the middle of the lunch hour, the cart running at full steam, when he looked up and saw her walking toward him with a manila envelope and a man in a yellow safety vest, who turned out to be from the city zoning office. She stopped 6 feet from the cart, held the envelope out without getting any closer, and told him to take it. Her voice was flat and businesslike, not cruel exactly, but carrying the particular quality of someone who has already decided the outcome and is only now making it official. Drake set down his ladle, wiped his hands on his apron, and took the envelope. He read it that evening at Miss Cora's kitchen table, because she had better reading glasses than he did, and because she had been on the block long enough to know what the language meant. The document stated that his cart was operating in violation of the sidewalk use ordinance attached to the commercial property line, that he had 30 days to come into compliance, and that failure to comply would result in a fine of $2,000 and removal of the cart. At the bottom, in a separate addendum, there was a clause about food service within 50 feet of a primary commercial entrance, and someone had highlighted Drake's cart's approximate location in yellow marker and drawn a line to the building's front door. 53 feet. Drake had always parked at 53 feet. The ordinance said 50. The highlighted line on the addendum said his cart fell at 47, which Drake knew was wrong. But the number was in the document now, official and yellow highlighted, and the document had Lena's management firm's letterhead at the top. Miss Cora set down her glasses and said, "She measured wrong on purpose." Drake said, "I know." Miss Cora said, "You going to let her run you off?" Drake said, "I'm going to call the city in the morning." He did. The city's sidewalk vendor compliance office told him that the measurement on file had been submitted by the managing property agent and was currently under review, and that he would receive a response within 10 to 14 business days. In the meantime, he was advised to cease operations to avoid the potential fine. The man on the phone said it in the apologetic tone of someone reading from a script he had not written and did not fully believe. Drake went back to the corner the next morning. He opened the cart, lit the burners, and started the morning soup. He had children to feed. Dre was furious when Drake told him. He stood by the pickup with his hands on his hips and said that a $2,000 fine would wipe out everything. Drake had saved in the last year because Drake had told him the exact number, and Dre kept track. He said they needed a lawyer. Drake said he knew a woman at the community center who did tenant and vendor rights consultations on Thursdays. He called her that same day. The woman, whose name was Sharon, told Drake that the measurement dispute was legitimately contestable, and that if he could produce a certified survey showing his cart's location, the cease and desist would almost certainly fail. A survey cost $280. Drake did not have $280 sitting loose. He had been feeding 60 children free over 11 years and running a cart on a corner where the rent never stopped rising. And his savings in April of year 11 sat at a little under $900. He wrote the check for the survey the same week and tried not to think about what 900 minus 280 left him. Miss Cora brought him a plate of her peach cobbler that Friday and sat with him through the slow afternoon. She told him she had seen harder things happen to better people on this block, and that none of them had broken him yet. Drake smiled at her and meant it. The thing about Miss Cora was that her faith in him was not the blind kind. It was the kind that had been paying attention for years and had reached a conclusion based on evidence, and he found that more steadying than anything softer would have been. 3 weeks after the cease and desist, word came down the block from 3 different people in the span of one morning that the holding company that owned the corner parcel had sold it, sold the whole thing. The 7-unit building, the commercial ground floor, the sidewalk rights, the parking strip behind, all of it, for $1.4 million to a private buyer. Nobody on the block knew the buyer's name. The sale had closed 2 weeks prior, and the new deed was already recorded. Drake heard this from Miss Cora, who had heard it from the mail carrier, who had heard it from the super in the building. Miss Cora said, "Could be better. Could be worse," Drake said. "Could be the new owner already knows about the cease and desist." He was thinking about the $2,000 fine and the survey and the $900 in his account, and what a new owner, with no stake in Clement Street's history, might decide to do with a cart that was already in legal dispute. Dre came by that afternoon and sat on the cooler lid and said what both of them were thinking. "If the new owner sides with Lena, the cart's gone." Drake said, "I know." Dre said, "Then what?" Drake looked at the cart, at the steam tray tilted 2 degrees left, at the folded menu he had never gotten around to replacing with a proper shim even after 11 years. He looked at the 3 kids eating on the bench he had dragged to the corner himself 6 years ago, a kid in a red coat and 2 smaller ones, all of them working through cups of his navy bean and collard soup. He said, "Then I'll figure out the next thing. I always have." Dre did not look comforted, but he stayed for the rest of the afternoon. The week after the news of the sale spread, Clement Street had the particular feeling it gets when things are about to change, and nobody knows which direction. The older residents stopped to talk at the corner more than usual, wanting proximity to whatever might happen. Lena drove by twice in 3 days, which was not her normal Tuesday schedule, and both times she slowed near the cart without stopping. Drake kept the burners lit and the menu the same. He served 312 cups of soup that week and gave free meals to 7 children on 4 of the 5 days he was open. He was going to hold the rule until someone physically removed the cart. He had decided that quietly, without announcing it, the way he had decided most things that mattered to him. The new owner came on a Thursday morning in the 2nd week of May. Drake noticed him first because of the way he was walking. Not the quick, purposeful stride of someone running an errand, and not the casual drift of someone who lived on the block. It was a slower, more deliberate walk, the walk of a man paying attention to things he had not seen in a long time, looking at the row houses and the storefront windows and the cracks in the sidewalk with an expression that was harder to name than simple interest. He was black, about Drake's height, 32 years old at most, in a dark jacket with no tie and leather shoes that were good without being showy. He had a folder of papers under one arm, and he was looking at the buildings, the way you look at something you once knew in a different form. He stopped at the cart. He stood there for a moment, reading the handwritten menu board. Drake kept propped on the side shelf, and Drake started filling a cup of the morning soup out of habit, before the man had even said anything. The man watched him do it with an expression Drake couldn't quite place, something between curiosity and something older and softer. "Red bean and okra," the man said, reading the board. "With smoked turkey neck," Drake said. "Got a corn cake if you want one," the man said. "How much?" $3 for the cup, 50 cents for the cake. The man paid with a 5 and said, "Keep the change." And Drake set the cup on the shelf and watched the man cradle it in both hands, the way someone handles something warm they haven't held in a long time. He took one sip and went very still. He looked at Drake. He said, "You make this the same way every day?" Drake said, "Near enough." "Why?" The man looked down at the cup. Then he looked back up. Is your name Drake? Drake said it was. The man said, I've been trying to remember the name for 23 years. I wasn't sure I had it right. He set the cup down on the shelf very carefully. The way you set something down when your hands have started to feel unreliable, he said. I used to come to this corner every morning before school. I was 9 years old. My mother was working early, and my sister hadn't learned to cook yet. And some mornings, the only thing I ate before noon was, whatever you put on this shelf right here. He touched the side shelf of the cart. Red bean and okra. Corn cake on top. You never charged me a single time. Drake was quiet. He was looking at the man's face and trying to locate the 9-year-old in it, the boy with the backpack and the one-strap shoelace, and then something around the eyes resolved into something he recognized, and he felt it land in his chest like a stone dropping into still water. The man said, My name is Marcus Webb. I bought this block last month. Dre had been coming around the side of the cart with a case of dry goods when Marcus said it. He set the case down on the sidewalk and stood there. Miss Cora was on her stoop. She had been watching since Marcus first stopped at the cart. The way she watched anything that felt significant. From a distance and very carefully, she did not move yet. Drake put both hands flat on the cart's surface. He said, You're the new owner. Marcus said, I am. Drake said, The Webb family. 2 doors down from Miss Cora. Your sister had a red coat. Marcus's jaw tightened briefly. He said, That's right, Janelle. She still has it, I think. His voice had roughened slightly at the mention of his sister, the small surprise of being known. Drake said, That was a hard winter. Marcus said, It was. And I ate at your cart every morning for almost 2 months. And you never once let me pay, and you never said a word about it to make me feel small. I was 9 years old, and I didn't know how to say thank you then. And I've been trying to figure out how to say it for 23 years. He opened the folder under his arm. He pulled out a sheet of paper and set it on the shelf beside the cup. It was a letter on the official letterhead of the property management firm, signed by Marcus and dated 3 days earlier, terminating Lena Holt's management contract, effective immediately upon delivery. I already sent her the notice, Marcus said. She'll get it today. Drake looked at the letter. He looked at Marcus. Marcus said, There's a cease and desist with your name on it that she filed under the old ownership. It's void. The new owner of the property is me. And I'm telling you directly that your cart is welcome here. But I want to do something more than that. He pulled out a second sheet from the folder. This one was a single-page lease agreement. He said, The ground floor commercial unit at the corner has been empty for 14 months. It's got a kitchen hood, a service counter, a back prep area, and a dining space for about 20 seats. I want you to take it, rent-free. Permanent use for as long as you want it, in exchange for one thing. Drake waited. Marcus said, Keep feeding the kids. The afternoon Lena Holt arrived on Clement Street with her clipboard to serve what she had. Planned as a follow-up notice, she found 3 things she had not expected. The first was that the management placard on the building door had been replaced. The second was that there was a small handwritten note taped in the window of the ground floor commercial unit, reading that the space was under new operation pending build-out. The third was Dre, who was standing on the sidewalk with his arms crossed and a copy of the termination letter in his hand, who told her quietly and directly that her authority over this property had ended 72 hours ago and that she had no further business here. Lena looked at the cart. She looked at Drake, who was standing behind the steam tray, serving the end of the lunch line, watching her over the heads of the people in front of him. He did not say anything. He did not need to. She looked at the letter in Dre's hand for a long moment, then turned and walked back to her car. She drove away from Clement Street and did not come back. Sharon from the community center received a call from Drake. That afternoon, contested measurement survey. The certified letter was already in the mail when he called, and there was a brief discussion about whether he should try to get the $280 back. Sharon said he probably could not, and Drake said that was fine. The survey had been worth doing regardless. Sharon laughed and said she had never heard someone say that about a survey. Drake said he had 11 years of practice finding the upside. The build-out took 6 weeks. Dre did most of the work himself on weekends, with 2 friends from the warehouse who knew electrical and tile. Marcus covered the materials, came by twice to check the progress, and stood for a long time one Saturday afternoon, looking at the kitchen hood being installed over the main burner station. Drake worked beside Dre every weekend, and most evenings during the week, taping and painting and learning more about commercial exhaust systems than he had ever expected to know. Miss Cora brought food both days of the second weekend, a big pot of her black-eyed peas on Saturday, and a pan of her sweet potato pie on Sunday, and sat in one of the plastic chairs Drake had moved into the dining space to keep them company while they worked. On the second Saturday of build-out, Marcus came by and sat with Miss Cora for almost an hour, while Drake and Dre were in the back running new gas lines. Drake heard their voices through the prep room wall, the low, warm cadence of 2 people who were meeting for the first time, but who had both been present for the same story from different ends of it. When he came out for water, Miss Cora was telling Marcus about the first morning Drake had set up on the corner, the second-hand cart with the broken wheel lock, and the woman on her way to work who had paid $2.50 and said it was better than anything on the block. Marcus was listening with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped.